The new channel. The new channel. Hashtag TNC Now.
The views, opinions, and insights expressed in the following shows are those of the host, producers, guests, and viewers. They do not necessarily reflect the position of the channel. Viewer discretion is advised.
Hello and welcome to the new channel. Our passion transforms a community that sees all things new. I am Alpha Sanford and I'm streaming live from Boston, Massachusetts. Good morning, good evening, good afternoon, mabuhay. Welcome to Once a Teacher, Always a Teacher on TNC. Hi everybody, it's me again. Can you believe it? This is our last episode for season 2. Thank you very much for always supporting the show. For those of you who are watching the replay or listening to these episodes for the last 2 seasons, my heart is full of gratitude to all of you. All right, folks, today's guest is not a stranger to all of you. We had her for our first season, and she talked about equity. This time, lots of things are happening in the world of equity, and I decided to actually bring her back as our last speaker because I know that the world of equity really intersects in so many aspects. And in her work, she has incorporated many dimensions of things that we don't normally talk about, which is about compassion, authenticity, belongingness, all of those great things that we all need to know. So let me just give a refresher in terms of the background of our speaker today. So allow me to introduce to you our guest speaker today, Ms. Cyndi Weekes Bradley. Cyndi Weekes Bradley has over 20 years of data-driven experience in equity, including racial equity. She served as a teacher, dean, school-based manager. She was also a Boston Principal Fellow. She served also as a special education assistant principal. She was a principal at a middle school. She was also a policy reviewer, a systems builder, analyst, education strategist, and associate lecturer, as well as the current founder and CEO of The Equity Process. We'll get to know more about The Equity Process later. Miss Cyndi Weekes Bradley holds a master's degree from Simmons University, an executive certificate in leadership and coaching from Brown University, and has taken numerous mindfulness courses. She is currently enrolled at Stanford University's C-CARE, or the Center for Compassion and Altruism Research and Education. Right now, she is in the final stages of completing her capstone, Bridging the Gap Between Racism and Humanity in Our Education System. So, without further ado, I'd like to bring in our guest speaker for today, Miss Cyndi Weekes Bradley.
Good morning, Alpha. Good afternoon, good evening, good night, everyone.
Hello. Thank you, Cyndi. Thank you for being with us again on this wonderful day. We appreciate you just sharing your time and your wisdom to our viewers and listeners.
Thank you.
Okay, so tell us, Cyndi, how are you? And most especially, tell us, how have you been since the beginning of this school year, and also since the last time we had you here on the show?
I'm doing well, often implementing some of the skills that I've learned over the course of the last couple of years, especially during COVID, like my mindfulness, breathing and meditation, and being compassionate with myself as I would be to a friend. Times have just called for that. So, since the beginning of the school year, I think I've been doing well. I don't feel too much stress as far as school's concerned there. I do have a few personal things going on, which may make me need to breathe a little more, but the school business is fine.
That's great. Now, what's new with your company, the equity process?
I don't really have much that's new this year. It's just a continuation of executive coaching, leadership coaching, equity audits, professional development, and really meeting people where they are. Surveys, testing the culture of schools, or really assessing the culture of schools is really an enhancement set of tools that we offer. We're not there to really judge or tell people exactly what to do. It's recommendations based on the data, and mainly just supporting them, meeting them where they are, and helping them move to the next level. And they determine, them and their data determine, as well as, global expectations, what the next level really looks like.
Oh, that's wonderful. Cyndi, for those of our viewers and listeners who don't know about the equity process, I know I've heard a few of the services, is what I would say, just a few minutes ago. But can you just summarize to our viewers and listeners, what does the equity process as a company do?
Well, it's really, we do a lot, working with public schools, working with private school, working with nonprofit institutions. And right now we're starting to work with private institutions as well, offering services such as professional development, helping people to understand equity, and racial equity and ethnic equity and microaggressions and harm, and how all of those things impact individuals who have been marginalized due to no fault of their own for years and centuries and decades. But I think what's a little different about how we do it is we really infuse compassion and mindfulness attitudes. We really try to embody them as the consultants and as the CEO, and we really engage in ways to help others embody them as well, so that we're clear on what the expectations are in the most kind and nurturing ways. But we need to be stern, then we have to be stern as well, because we don't want to continue harm or even build a bridge to harm. And I think that's the part that sometimes get a little sticky. People think compassion just has one side, which is like, oh, it's really tender and, soft and sweet. But compassion has another side too. And it's where you have to be firm and draw boundaries. And it's actually referred to as fierce compassion. And fierce compassion is the challenging aspect of the work that we do every day in schools and organizations that call for
Mhm.
people to stand up and be there for one another.
I love it. Actually, I think you just read my mind because our topic for today is really about compassionately living authentically in the intersection of equity and belonging. And I wanted to really ask, these are really big words. And I wanted to really understand, how are they different? I actually would like to ask you, how would you define these words? Let's start off with compassion, which I think you started to actually talk about,
Yeah.
and then living authentically, and then equity, and then belonging. If you can just, break it down for all of us, that would be great.
It's really a great question because I think compassion encompasses all of those, such as equity and belonging and so forth. And the reason why is because compassion means that you are inclusive. You are no different. There is common humanity, right? You are aware. You're mindful. It means that you're open. It means that you're curious. It means that you can set boundaries. And not boundaries to hurt, but boundaries to support and help.
Mhm.
And when I think about, the difference between compassion and empathy, there's just one or a few words that really guide, and that is empathy. We may feel what the other person feels, or we're able to put ourselves in their shoes. And with compassion, I wouldn't say the difference is, but the enhancement is that we act on that, right? So we're not holding all of those feelings inside, but we begin to really think about, how do we stand up and stand forward and stand with? How do we support, and how do we do that in ways that matter to the individual or individuals or the system or the cause or whatever it may be at the time? When I'm thinking about equity, on the other hand, I'm thinking about really ensuring that we're centering those who have been marginalized for decades and centuries when we do our work, and we're making sure that they get what they need. It's all the people that often feel othered and excluded. And by the way, compassion does not exclude, it's always inclusive. And when you do those things in a way where you're humble, I think that's where belonging comes in, because you are being inclusive and you give people a sense of, or a feeling that they're a part of the community, because you honor who they are, you celebrate who they are, you believe in who they are, which leads to authenticity, which is you just get to be. You just get to be you. You just get to be who you are at the core, without judgment, free of judgment from others, and total acceptance. And tolerance isn't the word that we kind of go towards, but inclusivity is the word. And people don't hold on to things, and they don't treat you poorly because you're not like them, or you have a different perspective, or your attitude is different, or you look different, or your gender is different, or your sexual orientation is different. None of that really matters when we're being compassionate. None of that really matters when we're being inclusive. None of that really matters when we're being equitable. And all of that matters when we want to talk about, like, how do you ensure that people feel as though they belong?
Oh my gosh, that's just amazing. You just had a way of defining these words beautifully, Cyndi. And what I took away from it is just living authentically. It's just being.
Yeah.
And all of these four different dimensions, they really mash in when it's done just the way it is. And the word humility is huge as an aspect of these, is what I heard
Yeah.
from you. Yeah. So thank
You
you.
have to be humble, because oftentimes we have an inner critic that may tell us negative things, and that has nothing to do with the critic on the outside that's often telling us negative things either. So it's really about, like, honing in on your inner guide and saying and trusting. That's one of the 9 mindful attitudes, trust. But you're not just trusting others. Forget about that. You're trusting yourself. I'm trusting myself to lead the way. I'm trusting myself to be. I'm trusting my journey. I'm trusting my path. And I'm trusting that I'm going to do this my way. And I think that that is the biggest, like, challenge that we have, because we're taught not to trust ourselves. We're taught not to have a sixth sense. We're taught not to listen to our inner voice. We're taught other things, like what we see, what we hear, what we smell, what we taste, and sometimes what we touch, but not often what we feel. And trusting yourself is getting back into the body and thinking about what you feel and how those feelings resonate and play out.
Was there ever a moment in your life as a simple human being? We're talking about, simple human being, taking away all the different titles that you have, all of your wonderful accomplishments, but just being a simple human being. When you realize that compassion is a priority in living.
I would say yes, but I probably didn't have a name for it because I was a child.
Okay, yeah.
And I think it's one of those things that you learn take you back to childhood, your whimsical years, your happy moments, your moments where your teacher's pencil fell and you rush to the front of the room to pick it up, right? That's
Yeah.
compassion. Or your friend is crying and you lean over to see if they're okay. That's compassion. As we age, we do that less and less and less and less because it's really not tolerated in society as a core value. So what we tend to do is hide behind that and be less vulnerable, because compassion is often not just suffering, but being vulnerable. And we don't want to be vulnerable as adults. As children, it's okay to be vulnerable, but we're taught very harshly, like as we age, that that's not a core value. But if you listen to people who have done a ton of research in vulnerability, like Brene Brown, for instance, she talks about being vulnerable, and that vulnerability leads to love and true love and compassion and humility, and really get you to the core of humanity, which is where we all need to be right now, especially in this day and age.
That's so true. I love Brene Brown. She's just an amazing person. So thank you for bringing her and her name into this space. Cyndi, I am curious. All of these four dimensions that we've referred in the topic for today. When did you have an aha moment in putting all of these great concepts together in the context of life and education?
I think I've had so many aha moments along the way. It's hard to just pinpoint one. But I know the most pivotal moment that I could think about is when I decided to leave my position as a principal and without a job. That was probably the most daring decision I ever made, because I had no idea what I was going to do next. But during that time, I had a term that said, everyone's like, well, where are you going to go? What are you going to do? Do you have a job? I'm like, no, I don't have a job, because I really didn't. And my term was, I'm just going to go love on myself, because I've really moved far away from that as a principal. I had to love on, thousands of kids over the years that I did not give birth to. I had to love on parents that felt like, they had no seat at the table. They were never heard. I had to deal with politics. I had to love on teachers. I had to discipline a lot. And I think that it kind of hardened me more than I wanted to be hardened. And when I made the decision to leave that position is when my life was like, okay, well, you don't have nothing, girl, but your family. So what are you going to do now? And it gave me an opportunity to stop doing and really become mindful about and intentional about, the steps that I'll be making next. And that led me to the state where I discovered I was an angry Black lady. And everyone around me should have been angry too. And the angry Black woman term should not be a term. It should just be like, we are angry. We are angry that society has fallen and we're not doing enough to support, changing it. And when I recognized that, I could say like, hey, I am angry. I'm angry at how we're treating, folks that have been marginalized. But they're not just marginalized. They literally have been marginalized by the majority of society, which are predominantly white people, especially in America. They've been marginalized for decades and centuries and years. And when I can say I'm angry about that and I can name it, that's when I knew I needed to do something about it, which led me to go back to school, which led me to quit my job again. When they were like, Cyndi, what are you doing? I'm going to figure it out, but I know this isn't it, right? I know this isn't it right now, because I have to be able to give to my family in the most compassionate ways. And I have to give to myself like I give to my friends all the time. And I couldn't do it being that frustrated, fighting for children and I fought for children for years. So it felt like, how am I going to fight for children differently, which will be more effective, which will allow me to be whole and allow me to support the people in this household. And that just led me down the path of becoming a more mindful practitioner. And it led me down the path of, really understanding the world from, probably like, a million feet above, like really thinking about that seat. And it allowed me to really hone in on what compassion is and what it means to me, and how can I use it to support leaders and teachers and students and families.
Wow. If there's an icon that I would put right now, I'd put like that love icon. So
Yeah, love is universal. I've learned that too.
it really is. So in your years working around this concept, and I know you are masterfully creating this concept. What was your biggest discovery? And whatever is this discovery, how does this correlate to the current situation of public education and even the overall mental health or well being of our students and
Yeah.
our educators?
There's a curriculum called the nonviolent curriculum, and my friend and I, her name is Elizabeth Redley. Like, we have like the deepest conversations about education and how we make it better. And the nonviolent curriculum has a list of needs that are not being met. And when you start to look at those lists of needs that are not being met, and you compare them to what I hear from students or what I hear from educators or what I hear from, parents, you understand that there are a lot of needs, a lot of psychological and social emotional needs that are not being met. And I felt like the quickest line to getting to meet them was compassion, understanding the science of compassion and understanding how compassion can really change the patterns of your brain and how you respond, and with gratitude. And the more you do it, the more you change, and it becomes who you are at the core. And when that becomes that shift back to those childhood whimsical years happen, and you become more compassionate with you, then you can become more compassionate with others. And that is the science of it all. So if we can become more compassionate practitioners, then we will begin to be more compassionate with students. And therefore, we will begin to be more compassionate with parents, our families, and everyone around us. But it starts here first.
That's right. Oh, thanks, Cyndi. Based from your observation, what's happening across the state that are best practices around compassion and equity? Or is there even any school
Of
that's
course.
doing it right now?
I truly believe one of the things that we do is, especially as educators, we look for perfection.
Uh-huh.
And as mortals, there's no word as perfection. We're all going to make mistakes, right? And if we are vulnerable with those mistakes and give ourselves the opportunity to lean in or fail forward, we'd understand that. But we're so busy covering up and trying to be perfect that we negate to understand that mistakes are really for us to learn how to do things a little better, right? Or not do things at all. With that being said, there are tons of schools all over the state that have leaders. And I believe it starts with the leadership. I do not believe that it just starts with the children. Children are naturally most compassionate most of the time anyways. They learn different things at, school and home and the playground and out in the stores and on TV and whatever that may shift that. But the core essence of a child is compassion. But I believe when we have compassionate leaders like the superintendents, right, their behavior really trickles down, and their expectations to the staff, the school leaders, the school-based leaders, then they're compassionate, and that shares and shows with the teachers and the staff at that level, who intend then to treat the children with the utmost respect by defining what respect is in that school and how it's valued. And I work with a lot of compassionate leaders. It is like one of the most beautiful things that I do. And I never knew that I would have this opportunity. And I look back at quitting my principal job, and I know that if I did not leave that position, I would not be so blessed right now to be with the leaders that I have. I have leaders in Lunenburg who are compassionate. I have leaders in Linfield who are compassionate. I have leaders in Hingham that are compassionate. I have leaders, I don't want to forget, I mean, all over the state. I do some work with this organization called MPY, and I see leaders, and leaders in this case may not be superintendents alone that show up, but counselors and teachers that really try to take it back to their schools in ways that matter. So the state has a lot of compassionate people. I don't think that they have a platform necessarily to be outwardly compassionate. They don't have a platform to say perfection is overrated. They don't have a platform to say, go on out there and be vulnerable. They don't have a platform that says you need to lift one another. They don't have a platform that has the tender side and draws some real strict boundaries. And if we give them the platform, we would see great things happen all over the state, not just in pockets, because I believe the people are here, they're ready to work, and they want to do the work. It's just they're often judged and criticized for how they do the work, and it really breeds a lot of fear within them.
That's wonderful. So, Cyndi, for districts and schools that are not quite there when it comes to the work of compassion, how would they start building more compassionate schools and districts?
I'll tell you, I know I forgot a lot of schools. So if I forgot naming some schools, understand that it wasn't that I didn't just name you. If I'm working with you, you're compassionate. Let me put that out there, because I don't want anyone to feel excluded. I just said the few names that came to me at first, and it was in no particular order. And we have, a limited time. Anyways, I think one of the things we just need to do is be authentic. I don't know. I've been doing this for over 20 years. And honestly, I found very few people that go into the field of education and don't have compassion somewhere in their bosom, right? It's like right there. But it's about really allowing it to come out. So it's creating safe and brave spaces within school, not just safe, but brave. It's thinking about the psychological safety of the adults in the building. It's thinking about the psychological safety of the parents. It's about listening at there's 3 levels to listen. It's about listening at level 3, not just level 1. Like level 1 is we listen to respond. That's a little combative. Level 3 is like we're listening, and we're listening with most our senses, because we really want to understand the perspective of whoever is talking. Like their voice is important. Their face is important. Their heart is important. So it's really having leaders listen at that level 3. Classroom teachers listen to students at that level 3, having students listen to each other at that level 3. And at the end of the day, building a culture that is really centered on kindness and naming it, and really bringing in the stakeholders to name it. So in this, classroom, in this school, in this district, we're going to be kind. Let's define kind. And when we're not being kind, let's call each other in on it. We're not calling out, because calling out can be unkind. But how do we then bring you into the conversation to talk about when you were not kind? And the best way to do that is talk about the impact of not being kind, because when we're in situations where kindness is not there, there's usually a negative impact. And if we don't tackle that, it can last for a long, long time.
That's right. It could lead to trauma.
It does lead to trauma. And talking about trauma, one of the things I've talked about for years was just secondary trauma. And I've recently been doing some research on it. And I think some of our staff just suffer from secondary trauma. And our kids' trauma, students' trauma may trigger their trauma. And that's what secondary trauma really is at the end of the day. But really thinking about secondary trauma and knowing that it's a real thing.
Thank you. Thanks, Cyndi. Now, how about tips? You mentioned that building compassionate schools really starts from the top, from the leaders. What would be some good tips that you can give to school-based leaders, the principals, superintendents, to prioritize equity and compassion and belongingness to all students?
So some tips that I do give is that I believe all school leaders should take a mindfulness course. Like that's number one. Like you have to become aware of what's going on around you, and mindfulness allows you to gain that awareness, but it also allows you to embody a lot of, the mindful attitudes and practice those. So I always tell my school leaders, like, I suggest you take mindfulness, and I'll tell you, they all do. Every single one of them, to the best of my knowledge, does, and they communicate with me about it. And who doesn't is very religious. So they may be like, okay, well, I have, my higher power, so I don't need that. But other than that, they do participate in mindful activities or mindful training. The other thing I tell them is, once again, you have to listen. You really have to listen, and not with your ears, but get an understanding of what is going on in your buildings, what is going on in your culture, like what is really happening. And it's not what people necessarily say, but watch how they move and look for that alignment. You have to be able to develop your core values for the district and really know that when those core values are made, your annual goals for teachers, for leaders, for anyone that has an evaluation should center around those core values. So we know that we're looking for them every single day during observations and casual conversations, and we're able to have those conversations. You have to create a atmosphere of where everyone can speak, and when harm is actually named, that you call that in, because that's not a value, right? Harm is never a value, and if it's not a value, it should be easier to talk about. You have to understand that there's this thing called difficult conversations, and there's training out there for difficult conversations. But beyond difficult conversations, there's courageous conversations. And beyond courageous conversations, there's compassionate conversations. So you can get some training in difficult conversations. You can get some training in courageous conversations, but without having some training in compassionate conversations, you often get frustrated. You have to have a way to measure this. If you can't measure it, how do you even know that it's working? How do you even know what you're doing? So you must have a way to measure it. And if you find during this measuring process, and it's not a judgment when you're measuring, it's more of a, where are we? What are we doing? How do we make it better? How do we continue to do what we're doing, right? And while you're measuring this, you have to make sure that you're sticking to those values that you named as well. So it's really a process. It doesn't happen overnight. It's a long journey, but you have to be in for it, I think, for the long haul. We're really rewiring our brains to do, the thing we call just humility, compassion, humanity, treating people, like you said, like people.
Yeah. Cyndi, it's my first time to actually hear about compassionate conversation. I know there's a training that's out there, right? But can you give us just a tiny summary, a quick summary of how does a compassion conversation look like?
There is no tiny summary, Alpha, but I will. Your questions are very deep, so there is no quick. But a compassionate conversation would include naming it, right? Naming whatever it is bothering you, hurting you. We call it suffering. So whatever is causing the suffering, you would actually have an opportunity to name what is causing the suffering. You can talk about why, but you get an opportunity to just say it all in about, a time frame. Let's say 3 minutes. You have 3 minutes to say what's causing you, the pain. Then you have an opportunity afterwards to that individual will have an opportunity to embrace it. Then the people or the person that's listening would have an opportunity to acknowledge it and really stand with that person. We're not there to tell you that it's wrong. And then you have an opportunity to release it. So that's the quickest way I can tell you, but it's really giving people an opportunity to share what that suffering is and how it's causing them suffering in their own way. And they don't have to share it in the common language of the school. Like if you spoke another language and you felt most comfortable speaking about that in the moment, it's just that we are listening to you. And then you can really, acknowledge what you said. And then you can offer yourself some love and compassion that, like you would give to a friend. And then, of course, we would acknowledge you, and then you would ultimately be able to release it. And that is the difference between all of those conversations. We may have a difficult conversation, and we often leave those conversations still holding on, not letting go. One of the mindful attitudes, but not letting go. We can have a courageous conversation, but once again, we leave those conversations still with things on our chest that we need to discuss. But in a compassionate conversation is when we really intentionally name it, give ourselves some love for being able to, hold on to it and also share it and then release it, and being acknowledged by the people around us, because that's all they can really do, and really then releasing it, to the universe or higher power, or however you want to release it. Just let it go. And there's science behind that really says that it works. And in training, we all felt better after doing that. So it's like immediately there's like a feeling of release that comes along. And that's the difference with the compassionate conversation.
I love it. I think just getting the summary from you regarding that, I feel like that is in so much in alignment in terms of my values and, the directions that I would like to go when it comes to having conversations.
Yeah.
So do you offer that, Cyndi?
I do. I do. I do that a lot in my executive coaching, because it's a different executive coaching. People come to you and say, hey, I need some help. Okay.
Right.
And, it's a different kind of atmosphere. In schools, it's often difficult to get to because there's so many different layers. There's usually a group, and you have to work through people being vulnerable in schools. And, and then you have to work through that trust, not that inner trust, but that trust of the room. But the one-on-one, I do it all the time, and it works.
Oh, very good. Okay, I'd like to take a break, but when we come back, I want to talk about belonging in the workplace. And in this case, in the workplace, in the public school setting, or in the education setting. All right. So, folks, see you in a bit, Cyndi. Folks, we'll be right back in a few minutes.
Juan Lu and his puppets face to face with special guests Makata Tawanan, Jess Box, and the Lunaria Marionette Show.
Salita. Alam mo, Tito Ando, kung wala ako, magsasalita ka nag-isa. Kung wala ako, wala kang masusuot. Kung wala ako, wala kang nakakain.
November 13, Sunday, 7 p.m. at the La Verdad Auditorium in Apalit, Pampanga. Buy your tickets now and see you soon, face to face.
The new channel is an online alternative new media platform of online shows for people on the go. Please watch all our shows as seen on screen. Imagine having your own show, your own playlist, your own content, but we make it easier for you. TNC aims to transform the lives of our viewers through engaging, authentic, and original content. Our channel is a responsible, global 24 over 7 platform that showcases Filipino talent, global influencers, cultural intelligence, and ingenuity. Please continue to watch Once a Teacher, Always a Teacher on selected Saturdays at 10:30 a.m. Eastern Standard Time. You can watch live or on the replay via Facebook or YouTube. You can follow us on IG, listen to us on Spotify and Apple Podcasts. Just search hashtag TNC Now. For sponsorships, please email now at thenewchannel.com or send us a DM. Enjoy these life-changing shows because we made them for you. Also, we would like to announce in Manila, we have the Oktoberfest going on until 10/23. If you're in Manila, please join them outdoors for a charity bazaar and spend good times at TNC's first ever face-to-face public event. TNC laid out fun activities across 3 days, and you can begin your holiday shopping. At the same time, you can hear your favorite songs from our hashtag Jam at Home buskers going live face to face too. You can also drive by the Mayflower Parking Greenfield District in the heart of the Tiger City this coming weekend, October 21, 22, and 23 from 4 p.m. to 12 midnight. That is in Manila time. Entrance is free, plus many surprises and giveaways for those who will go. Bibiyay na kami, so let's go! Sabay ka na! All right, folks. Thank you for still staying with us. I'm going to bring in our guest, Miss Cyndi Weekes Bradley, and this time we're going to talk about belonging in the workplace. Hi, Cyndi again.
Hi, Alpha.
Okay, so let's talk about that. How do we teach people the concept of belonging in the workplace, and what do some leaders need to do in order to make sure that all of their staff members, particularly educators, feel that they truly belong?
Wow, that's a that's a pretty deep question, Alpha. So, it's really layered. There's not like one thing that you can do, or and it all depends really on understanding, your people. That's probably the best way to put it. You need to understand your people. What are the needs of your people? What are the cultures of your people? What are the ethnicities of your people? What are their religious backgrounds? How do they identify, both race and even, sexual orientation? You need to understand your people. What do they value? What do they like? Why are they there? And ensure that your people are a part of everything that you do on a regular basis. You need to be able to celebrate your people authentically, honor your people in ways that matter to them, incentivize your people to make them feel as though they belong. You need to just let your people be who they are at the core. You need to name the values of the organization and ensure that you align it with your people, even during the hiring process. Sometimes we go into hiring and we don't think about the merit of who we're hiring, like what value will they bring, their background. We may get caught up on the title, but then that personality is not a fit. We may get caught up on, a race, but their credentials aren't a fit. We may get caught up on, I don't know, their gender. but really and truly their skill set is not a fit, So when you think about what merit really means to the organization, you have to ensure that your people have what it takes to carry out the mission, the vision, the values of what you have centered in order to run your company. And I think that's one thing that I do really well. Like, if you're not mindful, don't bother coming to the equity process, right? I don't want your foolishness. Like, you're not going to fight me. We're peaceful people. We just want to do the good work and, and make a difference. So if you're the person that wants to be there because it's cool or, you're not going to be a part of the organization, and not because I'm excluding you, but because your values don't mirror the values of the people there. And my consultants are very clear. Like, do they believe in mindfulness? Like, if I bring someone new, like, do they believe in mindfulness? So that has now become a merit, a credential, to be a part of the organization. Do they believe? Do they understand that equity is different? It's not racial equity, but it's really equity, meaning we're looking out for all. You have to understand some baseline values in order to be with me and the people that I work with on a regular basis. So really understanding who your people are, what makes them tick, what makes them happy, what brings them joy, making sure laughter is in the workplace, making sure they can show up as themselves, very professional, but as themselves as often as possible. The last time we spoke about the VIA character.
Yes.
Even knowing what your top 5 are for your VIA, or Brene Brown's values, knowing what your personal values are, or even looking at, nonviolent communications, like list of needs, knowing what your needs are and being able to articulate those really helps an organization have the right people for the job. And in schools, it'll be the right people to support other people's children, and in the organization, it just may be to provide that service or, sell that product.
Thanks, Cyndi.
You're welcome.
Now, I'm going to ask you again, what would be your advice to, people of power in schools, districts, and state level when it comes to inclusion and compassion at the workplace?
Yeah, there are a lot of ways to put this, and I could be very complex. But there's a leader in Massachusetts right now who has summed it up in 2 different words, and that's outrageous love. And his name is Dr. Holly. And I learned this from in Linfield, I work, and we were talking a lot about kindness, and the superintendent went away to a training, and she came back. She was like, "Oh my goodness, Cyndi, I heard about, someone talk about outrageous love, and that sound like you, and we're going to have outrageous love in Linfield and blah, blah, blah." And it doesn't matter, it's like this intent and impact, right? When you get all excited. And I can tell you that this particular superintendent, like, literally is working towards outrageous love. Will she fail? Probably. Like, that's life. It's whatever. You're going to fail. Like, that is inevitable. Failure is inevitable, right? But what will she do when she fails? She'll pick herself up like she often does and go again and learn from it, right? And she does that through the lens of outrageous love. And she tells her people about outrageous love. And her laugh is infectious. And you can feel outrageous love from this lady when she laughs. So there's this leader called Dr. Holly that does trainings in Massachusetts as well. And he may not name it compassion, but he summed it up in 2 words: outrageous love. And I think that's what we need right now. We just need to really think about, how do we love students outrageously? How do we fall in love with our staff despite their differences? How do we view perception and understand that there's no but or, but there's an and? So we're being inclusive. I see this and you see that. So it's both. It's okay. My friend Redley tells me all the time, well, Cyndi, 2 truths can be true. 2 truths can be true. And understanding that. And I think those are the sort of skills and understanding and beliefs that you need to go into this work, both inside schools and inside organizations. Outrageous love is how I would sum it up.
I love it. Outrageous love.
Outrageous love.
That's going to be my homework after this episode.
It doesn't. Okay, we acknowledge that you are a Black woman, Cyndi, so I'm not saying you don't acknowledge that. We embrace it, right?
Yes,
we celebrate it, right? We honor it. And how we honor it is by offering genuine, authentic, heartfelt, outrageous love.
I love it. So how about you just mentioned the word authentic, and I'm curious right now, Cyndi. Is there a system of getting to a level of authenticity, both at the workplace and then later on at home, or actually from home going to the workplace?
Compassion. You suffer a lot, right? So you suffer and 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 you suffer some more, but you stick to that suffering. You work through that suffering. And remember what I said, compassion is actually putting the action, right, to that suffering.
Correct.
So you are suffering, right? And
Yeah.
you're often suffering alone and you're
Uh-huh.
questioning yourself, but you stick with yourself and you learn to trust yourself and you build confidence. A lot of people will tell me often, oh, you're so courageous. And I think of courage a lot of ways. Or you're so confident. Yeah, I'm confident because I have to be. I'm courageous because things happen and I look around the room and everyone's sitting pretending like they didn't see what I saw when you know that you saw it, right? But I spoke up. So it's not always that you feel comfortable. It's not always that you feel good, but it's always that you have that thing inside of you that's saying, this isn't right. And
Right.
you got to do something about it. Right. And that's how your confidence builds. So after a while, you do that and you suffer and you do it some more and you suffer and you do it some more and you suffer. And you're like, I'm just going to suffer. So whatever. And then, I relocated, like I relocated my life. So I'm just going to suffer. Like, I know I'm going to suffer. I know my mouth is going to get me in trouble at work. Right. I know I'm going to say things that are going to hurt people's feelings. I know I have to recognize the impact because that is important. I know I have to be able to be, able to apologize and do it like true my own Cyndi self, right? And
That's
I
right.
know I'm going to suffer, and then I'm okay with suffering. Like it got to the point where I'm like, you know what? If suffering means I'm going to speak up for that kid, then fine, I'll suffer. If suffering means that I'm going to pull my car over and help the elderly cross the street, then I'm going to suffer. If suffering means that, I'm going to wear a mask outside and people are going to curse me, then I'm going to suffer. So I already made up in my head, I'm just going to suffer. That's just what it is. And then the world opened up. It was like, oh, I'm no longer like suffering. Oh, and if I do feel that, I can breathe and it changes my nervous system. And if I do feel suffering, I can meditate and get to the bottom of why and recognize chances are it wasn't me and it's really not about me. Like, and when you get to that place and you're like, okay, I'm just going to be me, regardless, I'm just going to be me because I can't play anyone as well, right, in this world as I can play myself. I am me and I want to be me and I don't want to be anyone else. And being me is actually fun,
It is.
and people expect me. So they're like, oh, that's just Cyndi, so it is what it is. So you get to be yourself by understanding that suffering is really inevitable. And you get to be yourself by understanding common humanity. You're not the only one suffering, boo-boo. We are all suffering, right?
Yeah.
And that common humanity really opens up a window to suffering like unbelievably like no other, right? So this window opens, oh, I'm not the only one that lost a parent. Like I recently lost my mom and I lost my dad 2 years ago, and I was all in my feelings like 2 years and poor me and poor Cyndi. And then I spoke to someone and they were like, I feel for you. I'm so sorry. My mom passed and my dad passed 3 months later. And then I'm like, oh, wow, I at least had 2 years. Then I spoke to someone else really close to me and her parents died in a month of each other.
Wow.
And she explained she never got to mourn either one because it was all this work that she had to do. And all of that humbled me. So it's really like, here I am, poor me, lost my parents in 2 years. And it's still sad, don't get me wrong, and it's still hurtful, but I understand, why they're not with me. I understand there's a higher power. I understand that God in the universe takes care of Cyndi. I understand that there are people out there that are in worse positions than me, and my heart goes out to them as much as it goes out to me. So that common humanity, that thread, it's never you alone. There's always someone out there that is suffering just as much or worse than you. And that just humbles me to no end. You have
Cindy,
to suffer to be authentic, Alpha.
right. Thank you for your wisdom.
Oh, you're welcome.
Yeah, very, very deep. Thank you, Cyndi. I feel like you have a lot of like inspiring stories that you can share to our viewers and listeners, but will you be able to share one inspiring story that continues to propel you in this work?
I would say it's my friend Redley. I don't know. This is the first one that came to my mind. We were
Oh,
we were in the middle of COVID and I was dealing with my father, and she literally was like, okay, we're gonna research and we're gonna do this. Like, she's a research queen, right? I research, but she's like, whoa. And we're like reading, papers from the UN and all over the world. And we're in China. We left America to understand what COVID was, to deal with my dad, right? We became doctors overnight. Like, it was okay. But then after he passed, Redley called me and she was like, Cyndi, this is going to be a year of yes. I'm like, what is a year of yes, girl? Like, what are you talking about? So we had
right.
this conversation about Shonda Rhimes and a year of yes and how she got to be who she is. She just said, I'm just going to say yes. And it was a year of yes. And I began saying yes to just about everything that I thought I could handle without being overwhelmed, like staying really, like moving out of my comfort zone. There's these zones in mindfulness that we talk about, your panic zone or your overwhelming zone, your learning zone, and your comfort zone. So the year of yes for her and I really meant moving out of our comfort zone, our zone of expertise, and dabbling in this learning zone, this challenging zone, and not ever becoming overwhelmed. Like, that was one of our values or our pacts. Like, we made a pact, and anything that meant that we were going to gain a new experience or learn something new or try something different, it was a year of yes. And that year of yes turned into 2 years of yes, going on 3 years of yes. And we're both still saying yes together. And I think that journey has taught me a lot. And just that one commitment to a year of yes without any expectations. It was like, it's going to be a year of yes, and we're going to be millionaires it wasn't nothing like that. It was just like, whatever happens, happens. But this is going to be a year of yes. And it's now 3 years, going on 3 years of yes.
Oh, I love it. And shout out to your friend, Elizabeth
Yes.
Redley. I heard her name at least twice, if not 3 times during this episode. So would love to have, I'd love to have Elizabeth Redley in the show and get her wisdom and share her wisdom to our viewers as well.
She's an awesome person. She's much more shy than I am, but maybe you could convince her, cheers to another yes and
Yeah.
come on the
Oh, I
show.
love that.
Yeah.
Yeah, I love it. All right, Cyndi, I can't believe we're coming up to the end of this show. I feel like people, especially education leaders, would want to get in touch with you and really learn more from your wisdom. I'm feeling that there are sense of spirituality here, even some insights from Buddhism and
Yeah.
all the different concepts of many religions, but spirituality
Definitely.
it's definitely what I've felt and heard from you throughout. So, but more than that, I feel like based on this conversation, there's truly a need for building and developing more compassionate schools that really value equity and belongingness and inclusion. So, where can they find you?
Yes, so they can find me on my website, right? Or they can just Google my name, Cyndi, Cyndi. Last name is Weekes. It's 2 of them, Weekes, and then Bradley, Bradley. Or they can just go to the equityprocess.org, which is my website, and just fill out a quick little form to get in contact with me. And we have plenty of compassionate tools. I've actually developed about 2 or 3 of them now that are all copywritten and all can be worked within schools and different organizations to cultivate compassion in the workplace, cultivate compassion for yourself, cultivate authenticity, and cultivate outrageous love for yourself, your family, and for students, because it starts with self before it goes and extends to anyone else.
Well, thank you, Cyndi.
You're welcome, Alpha.
And thank you for the time that you have given us today. My wish for you and the equity process is that you continue to shine light to many who are still in darkness.
Oh, that's so sweet. That's my wish for me too.
Oh!
Thank you, Alpha.
You're welcome, Cyndi.
Thank
I
you.
believe your work is so important in this world where there are lots of anger, lots of
Yeah.
unkindness. So we need your light.
And lots of suffering.
That's right. That's
Yeah.
right. All right, folks. Thanks again, Cyndi. And to all of our viewers and listeners, we thank you for being with us. This is the end of our season 2. And hopefully, we will go into season 3 in the next few weeks. But we thank all of you for being with us. All right, folks, have a good day. Enjoy your day. And just as what Cyndi Weekes Bradley mentioned, or at least from this topic, live compassionately. And I think I like the word peace. Peace, everybody.
Peace, Alpha.
Peace.
Bye. Thank you. Take care.
Bye.